Okay, let's go. With me today is Jeff McKeon. Jeff is a coach, mentor, and practitioner of purpose. Now, Jeff survived a heart attack on the 17th of February 2019, which made him ask himself some simple yet thought-provoking questions. The answers propelled Jeff into a new career and a different life purpose. Welcome, Jeff, and thanks for joining me today.
Good morning. Thanks for having me, Christy. Fantastic to be on board.
So, Jeff, you and I were introduced by a mutual friend who thought that your story would really fit the mission of this podcast. So I'm really looking forward to hearing you tell it, and I'm sure the listeners are as well. But I wanted to firstly ask you, could you tell me about the time when you had your heart attack? Let's start there.
Yeah, okay. So that's to just give everyone reference and what I learnt and what happened. So I've been a cyclist for about 30 years. I was originally a swimmer. That was in school. That's what I loved. But then when I finished school, I fell in love with cycling, and that was something that I did a lot. And I've travelled all around Queensland, parts of Australia, just cycling because it's what I love doing. So I was training to do a charity bike ride. So this charity bike ride was 1,600 kilometres in 8 days, riding from Townsville to Brisbane. I'd already done it back in 2017, so I was ready and starting training for 2019. As an endurance cyclist, it's not about how fast you go, it's about how many hours you can spend enduring the joy of cycling. It's not always joyous when it's 8 hours of pain. So anyway, a Sunday afternoon, perfect day, lawns mowed, gardens hedged. My son was on the couch. My wife had gone down the shops to get some steak for a barbie in the afternoon. There was beer in the fridge, and I said, righto, I'm going for a ride. Just a quick one. We've got some mountains near us, so I was going out to a place called Clear Mountain, which is quite a steep little challenging climb, but that's the kind of training I was doing. So anyway, jumped on my bike and felt like a grandma. Had no energy whatsoever, just not the ability to even ride with any effort. And maybe 500 meters into the ride, I then started to get a lateral chest pain, a low-grade pain, maybe a 3 out of 10. So nothing like the movies. I wasn't clutching at my chest. I wasn't, pain down my arms. I wasn't short of breath. I was on a push bike, so, you're going to be breathing differently anyway. And I kept riding for a little bit going, this is really unusual. And deep in the recesses of my mind, I remember hearing an interview, and I don't know whether it was on a podcast. It probably would have been an interview with an AFL doctor in Melbourne, and he spoke of his heart attack. He'd had a massive cardiac arrest on the Etihad Stadium, and the day before he was running, and he had no energy and no power at all. And as a doctor, he ignored the signs. And then he had a massive cardiac arrest. Now, he was resussed on the field. This was prior to the game. And so that's looping around inside my head going, oh, I wonder if that's what this is. And then so because I then became aware of it, it then was, okay, I'm close to home. What do I do? Do I get off the bike now? But knowing where I was, I knew it was okay to roll home. It was like I'd probably only gone a kilometre down the road. So I knew it was okay. If it had got progressively worse, I would have jumped off the bike straight away. But because it stayed at that constant 3 out of 10, I went, okay, I can navigate this. I can get home. So literally, I'd been on the bike 7 minutes. I think we worked it out. Maybe less than that, 6 minutes by the time I rode back in the driveway. And I walked in and my son said, hey, Dad, that didn't take you long. And I went, no, well, I'm just going to make a couple of phone calls. I'm going to ring your mum, and I'm going to ring the ambulance because I think I'm having a heart attack. And I was trying to stay as calm for him and just be under control. And he went, well, that's all right, Dad. There's cricket on the telly. So teenage boy, I wonder where he gets his cheek from. But anyway, that was a great thing. Later on he said, look, Dad, I was just trying to stay calm for you. But because I was really conscious of it and really aware, it was almost like what is happening to me? And it was really like not an out-of-body experience, but it was, okay, let's work through this. Let's be aware of what's going on. So when I got on the phone to 000, and this is my big message for everyone. If you have things that are out of the norm in your body, if you have shortness of breath, if you're dizzy, if you have chest pain, arm pain, neck pain, jaw pain, they're all subtle signs of a heart attack. So ring 000. The process is there. Just don't ignore what goes on. So anyway, I made the phone call and I went through my symptoms and discussed it at length. And I was very calm about the whole situation to talk them through my situation. And I said, look, I don't think we need lights and sirens, but I think I'm having a heart attack. So sure enough, yeah, I'd had a heart attack. I had a single blockage in one of my arteries. I was in hospital 25 minutes later. I was operated on the next day. I had a single stent in. So it was just a blockage of one artery. And I had a really good medical outcome. I was already fit and active and healthy. So it was just one of those things. I'd had this particular blockage. And after that, one of the things I did was made sure there's a thing called a coronary artery calcium score. Talk to your doctor about it. Coronary artery calcium score. Once you get over 45, you should be getting that done regularly. Because I was the fittest out of my group, there were 8 other people I knew who got their test done within a short period of time. And it actually saved my brother's life because it turned out he had exactly the same blockage. Wow. He's not as fit as me, not as active as me, carries more weight than me. Thankfully, his blockage wasn't as bad and it was able to be treated.
I think that's such a good, yeah, absolutely. And I think that's such a good lesson because, you know, we hear about, you know, the typical symptoms, but you don't always get the typical symptoms. And I know that women's symptoms are different to men's symptoms. So I think people really need to become aware with those symptoms and don't be afraid to call 000. But one other thing, Jeff, I probably would have called the ambulance before your wife.
Well, no, I did. I called sorry, that was how I explained it. No, I did call the ambulance first, then I called my wife. Yeah, she said to me, you know, and that's humour is a big thing in my world. And I said to her, look, can you come home? And she went, I haven't finished shopping. And I went, well, I've just called the ambulance because I think I'm having a heart attack. So yeah, she came home very quickly. Yes.
Wow. So
but that's why my title, and that's where for me, just sorry to cut you off there, is that's why I've come to this thing about the inspired survivor. I've learned so many lessons in the last 18 months about life because you get to ask yourself those questions.
Absolutely. And I think we'll come to those questions in a minute. And I really want to understand, you know, what the Practitioner of Purpose is and how that all came about. But just tell me a little bit about what your life was like before that. So obviously you were super fit. You were part of the Lycra crew, getting about on your cycle and obviously supporting charity as well. But what was your day-to-day and career like before this happened to you?
Okay, so my day-to-day job is I was a fleet manager at a Toyota dealership, quite a large one in Brisbane, quite a successful operation. So I was running a team of people. We were high-level, high-performing team. So it was actually a great environment to be in within that team. The industry itself doesn't have a very good reputation, but Toyota has an exceptional reputation. So Toyota are the benchmark. So being involved in that was actually a really good part of the business. Like all jobs, there are always challenges. There are always issues within any industry. And I think the motor industry is really crying out for a catalyst to change. And I actually think COVID is having an impact on that they have to review a lot of their business practices because the old model is no longer relevant and is not going to keep working long term. So, you know, I had a team. There was 5 or 6 people that underneath my staff. You know, we were responsible for half the turnover of new cars for the business. So it was quite a full-on job, but exciting because it was always changing. It was never the same thing. Yeah.
Would you have considered it a stressful job at the time?
Not by that stage. No, I was actually probably the least stressed guy I knew. Wow. I'd already come to I guess that journey of discovery, and I hate the word journey, but that's about it. I'd become aware. There's this wonderful 15-minute clip, YouTube clip, that I recommend to everyone. Her name is Kelly McGonigal, and she talks about your relationship with stress. And I watched that video about 5 years ago, and it instantly changed my relationship with stress. Because if you're stressed and you tell yourself you're stressed, you make yourself more stressed.
Mm. Well, definitely, I'd love to share that YouTube clip and have to watch it myself, because I'm not aware of it.
Yeah, and if you tell yourself that the feeling of stress is just your body prepared for the battle, instantly it switches, because you're reinforcing that you're ready for this, you're prepared for this. Your body is actually prepared. Learning that and putting that in practice meant that I was literally the least stressed guy I knew. However, the previous 20 years was probably where all the stress came from, because I fought against, an outdated system and a business model that I didn't necessarily agree with. And I could see that it needed change. But that was one of those things. I think that's where the underlying stress came from years previously. The actual heart attack came out of the blue, because you wouldn't, if you'd met me, seen me, you would not have thought I was stressed at all.
Wow.
High performing team, and just kicking goals left, right, and centre in personal and professional life.
Because you were there for a long time, and I think you've only had a couple of jobs throughout your whole career, which spans, I'm not saying you're old, but spans quite a few years. So, you obviously enjoyed the job. So do you think that over the years, your sort of moral alignment changed with the business model?
I think, and the more you read, the more you come across concepts, and there's this beautiful term, and I still don't understand its true meaning, but cognitive dissonance, the difference between what your heart says and what you do for a living. And I think that long term is what creates so much stress, because the minute we put money is a multiplier. If you've got money, you're a good person with money. If you've got money and you're a bad person, you're a bad person with money. So greed does all these terrible things to people. Fundamentally inside, I didn't enjoy greed. I liked nice things, but I didn't like the sell process. I just happened to be really good at it, which was contradictory. But that's that thing where your heart says, no, you should be doing something else. But you go, well, I'm being paid to do this. I'm really good at it. It's creating a lifestyle for my family, which is what I wanted to do. You put up with a lot of things over a lot of time. I think all of us go through that cycle until you reach a point where you go, hang on a sec, should I be doing this?
Yeah, I think a lot of people sort of just go through the motions. They go to work, they earn their paycheck, and they're supporting their family. So it's really hard to get off that cycle. But I just wanted to roll it back a little bit, because we briefly spoke, not for very long prior to this, and you did tell me a little bit about your childhood, and it was quite troubling. So are you able to share with the listeners just a bit of background about you prior to your career, and what the things that you went through as a child?
Yeah, look, and I reflected on that after we first chat to talk about where I came from and what I had. And it's more about what is the lesson out of that. As you get older, you can reflect back. But let's roll back that I grew up, my dad was an alcoholic bricklayer. That created a lot of issues within our family. The only saving grace was that he wasn't violently abusive, but he was certainly emotionally, verbally. He was a manipulator, all the classic things that aligned with someone who is an alcoholic. So I grew up in my childhood thinking this was fairly normal, that my parents would have screaming matches. I thought it was normal to go down to the pub on a Friday night to say goodnight to my dad in my pajamas, because the pub was a block away. So rather than wait for dad to come home, because on a Friday night as a bricklayer, he'd be drunk, my mum, the only coping mechanism she had was to take us down to say goodnight. So we'd literally go down in our pajamas and our slippers and say goodnight to our dad at the pub. So that I grew up just thinking that was normal. That then created a whole pile of issues for my mum. She was doing the best she could to put up with that. And, in reflection, he was doing the best he could as well, because he was working hard, but his family, his family were alcoholics. His parents were alcoholics. It was a real issue within that family. And so fast forward to, I was about 10 or 11 when Dad finally moved out. Well, moved out's the wrong word. When Mum finally said, get out, I think that was, she'd reached the point where she just said, we can't continue living like this. You need to go. And I still remember that day. I can actually remember sitting, Mum and Dad were in the car outside, and I still remember sitting in my bedroom looking through the window. And it's that thing as a kid, what did I do wrong? It's really, when you reflect on it, what did I do wrong? I didn't do anything wrong. I was an 11-year-old kid. They had their own issues that they couldn't overcome. But as an 11-year-old kid, you just see your mum and dad are getting divorced. And so that then created, then we moved into a period of my life. And what a time in your teenage years, your real formative years, to be absolutely broke, to be living in a little country town with where you had to sell everything you owned just to try and get through. So I grew up with a massive scarcity mindset where everything was, you had no money, you had very limited food, and then you add to that, and I want to sort of fast forward a bit, but I'll stay in this area for a little while, is that at the same time, my mum was struggling with obesity. She'd just been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, and she was having a terrible time. That part of her life was really traumatic for her, and that created a lot of habitual problems with overeating and hoarding. My mum was a hoarder. So you put all that together, that was not giving myself or my older brother a really good foundation for becoming adults. It was really challenging because there was a lot of things that were, quite traumatic, and stayed with me till I'm talking, a lot of this I didn't deal with until my mid 40s or early 40s. Was I able to process some of the things? I mean, I remember a guy turning up to our house with a loaded semi-automatic rifle, and my dad grabbing the rifle off this guy, because there was a party. There was always a party at our place. That's, alcoholics are great at bringing parties to their place, and him emptying the rifle, the bullets falling on the ground, and telling us kids to pick the bullets up while they dragged old mate outside.
Oh my goodness.
I would have been 6 or 7 at the time. Right?
So it just blows my mind. And I just think, we look at things that happen to children, and so many children become a product of their society and their upbringing. And you've really changed that. So how, you didn't deal with it until sort of your 40s, but how did you come to that realization that it wasn't your fault that your parents split up? It wasn't your fault that your dad drank. It wasn't your fault that your mum hoarded and went through those challenging times. How did you deal with that?
Two things, and I'll read a quote, because I think this is really important in regards to what we're talking about. So, and I only came across this quote in the last few years, but it really, really brings it home. So, a transitional character, a person who in a single generation changes the entire course of their lineage, who somehow find a way to metabolize the poison and refuse to pass it on to their children. They break the mold. Their contribution to humanity is to filter the destructiveness out of their own lineage, so that the generations downstream will have a supportive foundation upon which to build productive lives. And that was Dr. Carl Frederick Broderick, PhD, in 1997 or something, right? That quote is what I did. I stopped it with me. And I stopped it 2 ways. One, I'm a reader, so I read a lot. But the other thing that I did, I fell in love with the right person. That was it. I fell in love with the right person 28 years ago. We're still married. It's our 25th wedding anniversary this year. And literally in my life, it's the greatest achievement of my life, is the love affair with my wife.
That's
we
beautiful.
knew 2 weeks. Yeah, we
Wow.
just we were so lucky, and we both came from situations that weren't overly pleasant, and we both came out of relationships that weren't healthy, and we found each other. So there's 7 billion people in the world. There's always that right person out there somewhere.
Absolutely. My partner said to me the other day, we've been together 25 years, and he said, goes, out of all the people in the world that we could find, he goes, we really just found our soulmates. So it's amazing how the universe brings people together. And obviously, you know, in a lot of times it brings people together for the right reasons. Unfortunately, there's some times where people come together and it's just not a great fit, but it's really lovely to hear those success stories. But it sounds like you made a really conscious decision to change your life and to make sure that your children didn't go through what you went through. Do you struggle sometimes with what sort of the way that they're being brought up and have that, oh, I didn't get to be brought up like that, and you know, you need to listen to me because, you know, I'm trying to do the best for you, and you don't know what, you know, life is like when it's really hard. Do you have those sort of moments?
Yeah, look, there's 2 lessons that really came home, and one, and I struggled with alcohol, right? That was a big issue for me, and a big challenge is to struggle with my struggle with alcohol, not as a destructive, but as a party element, because I wanted to forget. So I wanted to be in the party. I wanted to always be where the party was. Wherever that was, I wanted to be in it, whether that was mates' places, whether that was pub, whether that was at sport. I love sport. I love live concerts, right? Because what I was actually looking for was that feeling and that buzz. So I was always hated missing out on a concert, hated missing out on a great sporting, you know, a great game of footy or something like that. So I struggled with alcohol, particularly when our kids were very young. And it was a very distinct moment. My daughter was about 6 months old, so my son was about 2.5. So they're both teenagers now. So, and my wife said, "Are we going to keep going like this?" And that was the slap in the face. That was me going, "Oh, hang on, I'm a dad. I can't keep doing this. You know, I've got to change." That was the moment. We still talk about that now. You know, that's 13 years ago that we had that moment and that conversation. So then fast forward a few years, because that meant, oh, hang on, I've got to stop this. I've got to change something. Don't get me wrong. I still, I still made sure that I was enjoying what I was doing and socializing, but I really made a conscious effort when it came to alcohol to restrict what I was doing. The other thing that came through, so then you fast forward and you go, righto, I'm going to work really hard to provide my family with a lifestyle I never had. I'm going to work really, really hard. And that's what I'm going to push and sacrifice and do everything and work the extra hours, which is, so many people go through that. So many people get trapped by that. And I remember my son saying, and I think he was about 7 or 8. So he's now about to go 15. And he said, "Dad, I just want you to come home and play cricket in the backyard with me." And that was it. Like, even talking about that now, that was that moment. And if I'd ignored that moment, I would have impacted that child's life forever. But that was that moment of reflection. So what I did was I sat down with my phone and we put a reminder every afternoon. "Dad, time to come home. Love, TJ." So every afternoon at 4:45, that would come up on my phone, on my computer. Now, if I could make it, I'd come home. If not, I'd send him a message. So at least he knew that I was thinking of him. Even if I couldn't come home, I was thinking of him and he was aware. So that was there for years in my diary.
That's such a powerful thing.
Yeah, but that's those 2 moments. And if you miss those moments, where does your life go? What part? So that's why when I was having my heart attack, I listened to that moment. One of the things I heard when I was in the hospital in recovery is so many men. There were 5 men in the ward that day with me, as well as me. So there was 6 of us in total. And all these men talking about, "Oh, yeah, I had pain for weeks."
Wow.
They were talking about chest pain and sore backs and all this stuff for weeks. I mean, I had it once and I went, "No, that's it. I'm done. I'm going to the hospital." I reckon because it was so out of the blue. And as a cyclist, you can endure pain. And when you cycle for 8 to 10 hours in a day, even the webbing between your fingers hurts because of the gloves for 8 or 9 hours, let alone the rest of your body hurting. So the pain itself wasn't that bad. But that's when you've got to listen to those moments. It's those defining moments that change your life and the people around you, because you either ignore them or you pay attention to them, because that's call it the universe, call it your higher power, call it whatever you want. They're those moments sending you a message, and you need to tap into those. You need to listen to those because they're instinctive.
Yeah, definitely. Because I think a lot of men tend to not listen when things are not going very well. They might feel unwell and have these symptoms that they really just is not normal for them, but they don't do anything about it. So do you think with yours that it was just so out of the blue and you were just like, no, I'm going to do something about this straight away because I just know it just feels so different?
Yeah, because I'd ridden up on the Friday before, I'd ridden up Mount Cootha 3 times. You know, here in Brisbane, it's a steep hill, and I'm a big bloke. I mean, I'm 6'2" tall, and I weigh 95 kilos. I'm a big guy, so it takes a lot of effort. But I couldn't ride down the street. You know, so that's why when you got to listen, you got to listen. That's just not normal. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Now, you had a very influential person in your youth, so not necessarily your parents, but you had somebody else that was, influential for you. So can you tell me a little bit about that relationship?
Yeah, so that's my mentor. His name was Alan Maxwell. Alan came into my life, my wife and I, probably close to 20 years ago. So it was in my mid-20s. It was really in that formative age. And he just came unconditionally as a friend. We had a mutual friend. We knew each other. And Alan was 20 years older than me, but he took me under his wing. And so he started to, just impart stories with me and show me things and teach me things. And then he became that father figure that I wanted to aspire to, because I couldn't replicate what I had with my dad because it wasn't there. So I needed someone to give me that or show me that pathway. And so that was probably where Alan had the greatest influence on my life, of showing me that there's a better way. He showed me his mistakes. He told openly about his mistakes. He spoke about friendships, relationships, all those things that, they're the adult conversations that I never had. They had conversations with my mum and dad that they just weren't in that place they were struggling with their own battles and their own demons. How could they educate? How could they change themselves, let alone change their children?
So do you think that relationship was the catalyst for you to be able to completely reassess your life and where you wanted to go with it?
Oh, very much so. So Alan was he was that guy that inspired me, and made me a better person, and then challenged me as well. So there are a couple of things he said to me to challenge me. Because one of the things that I was always good, I always had a great social circle. I always had great friends, and I still to this day. One of my best mates, John, that was our mutual friend, John McDonald. We've known each other since we were 5. So that's a 45-year friendship, and it's one of the greatest things of my life. Is having my best mate for 45 years, and we've been in and out of each other's lives over that time. So it's really great that connection's always there. But that was the thing that Alan taught me, is these values, these core values, and it's about loving and relationships and things like that. I was in love with my wife, but I didn't have that role model, and that was the thing that I was missing. It was really important that he came into my life when he did. Sadly, we lost Alan 5 years ago to cancer. So that was another catalyst for me to. So in 2014, with my cycling, I started actually doing these charity rides and raising money for cancer research. So in the last 6 years, I think the total would be somewhere around close to $45,000, maybe $50,000 that I've helped raise.
That's amazing.
And it's in his honor. Like, that's the thing. I'm doing it. I love cycling, but I get to do it for my mate. And I got to tell him before he died. You know, I got to tell him I was doing it. So I started in 2014 because his battle with cancer was for about 5-6 years. It was quite difficult. So I got to tell him. I also got to tell him that, you know, one day in the future I'll go into business, and his name will be, honoured in my business, you know, because that's how you leave a legacy. You know, he inspired me, so I got to tell him before we lost him that's what I would do. You know, fast forward to now.
Yeah, and you have done that. But before we touch on that, I'd really like to ask you to explain the 3 questions that you asked yourself when you had that heart attack to make you, progress into this completely different, spectrum of your life.
Yeah. Well, I read that they were in a book. I do a lot, like I said, reading's great, knowledge is great, podcasts are great. I talk to people about, and I'll loop back, but I talk to people about traffic university. If you're stuck in a car, stuck in a train, what are you sticking in your ears? What are you listening to? If you're listening to the same ads, the same songs on repeat, what are you getting? If you listen to an audiobook or a podcast, you're getting all this great information and great knowledge. And particularly if you're listening to an audiobook, that's 20 years of someone's career distilled down into a few days. Like you get so much knowledge out of that. But anyway, there was a book, High Performance Habits by a bloke by the name of Brendan Burchard. And it actually that book had a massive impact on it. But he asked 3 questions. Did you live? Did you love? Did you matter? So while I was on my bike, my version of those questions was, will my family be okay? Have I set my family up and will they be okay? Am I a good person? And have I had a good life? And that was it. I got to ask myself those questions while freewheeling down a hill having a heart attack. And I was okay with all of that. And I was at peace. That was the clearest moment. That was absolute clarity on purpose, on life. If you get to ask yourself those questions and you're okay, keep going. If you get to ask yourself those questions and they're no's and you get them wrong, well, then you've got to change, and you've got to change something in a massive way, in a hurry. And that's that life affirming moment. Like, wow. I don't wish it upon anyone. I don't want anyone to go through a heart attack. Just do it and ask yourself, did you live? Did you love? Did you matter? Ask yourself those questions all the time. Don't wait to that, that big moment. Like, literally, don't wait for the heart attack moment to ask the question. Do it before then.
So your answers were obviously positive. You felt content with the life that you had lived. But you did go on to make some drastic changes to your life. So why did that come about?
Well, to go through what I've done. So I stopped working 31st of March this year. I finished up with Toyota, and it was a great experience for me. It was really strange because that was right in the middle of the COVID shutdown. So having worked in one company for 11 years, I walked out the front door without a handshake and without a hug. It was a really weird experience as a social experiment. But keep in mind, I'm at peace. So for me, my ego wasn't invested in that. But it was a really unusual experience to not have your big lunch and not have your send off. And it was just, okay, out you go, out the door. So I've set up a business. It's called Maxwell McKeon Enterprises, in honour of my mate Alan. 10% of revenue will be donated to cancer research. So that's part of my business charter. That's how it's set up. And that money will go to melanoma research here in Queensland, because melanoma is the biggest killer here in Queensland, because we are too close to the equator. We shouldn't be here. Anyway, so my business has 2 really specific things that it's designed to do. And it's the reason I'm a practitioner of purpose. Purpose can be found in anything you do. You can be laying bricks and find purpose. Ironically, my dad was a bricklayer. That's why I used the reference. But you're either laying bricks, or you're building a cathedral, or you're building a school, or you're building someone's home. It's the story you tell yourself. So 2 parts of my business. One, is how to teach families, businesses, how to teach gratitude, empathy, and mindfulness on a daily basis. The key to long-term happiness is to be grateful for what you have. Working for Toyota, I saw so many people buying stuff they couldn't afford to try and feel good. And that's really problematic in a Western society. We think we're going to get happy when we have this or when we get that. When you have the big house or have the nice car, that you will be happy. Happiness comes from what you've got now. So happiness comes from your gratitude with what you actually have now. So if you're grateful for what you have, you're already happy. You even, the gratitude goes even better and higher when you then get something that you appreciate. So that's one side of it. Yep.
I think as society, we do seek out materialistic things to fulfill us so often. Yes. And, when you do sort of look into the happiest people out there, they don't really do that. So what would your advice be to people that are trying to fulfill themselves and to make themselves happy, and they are on that journey of, buying things and going into debt and wanting to have the biggest house on the street and the best car? And, some cars nowadays, they cost more than half a house type thing. So what would your advice be to people that are doing that, to how they stop and really reevaluate their life and their situation?
So there's two really simple exercises. So don't have a heart attack, right? Because when you have a heart attack, you realize none of that stuff's important. You actually realize at that very moment, what you have is irrelevant. Who you have is so important, not what you have. And that's where we've been told a bit of a lie. We've always been told, I'll work hard and then you'll retire happy. No, if you're not happy while you're working, you're not going to be happy when you retire. And so that's where, when you have those moments of clarity where you can be grateful for what you have. Because when you're grateful for your breath, in my case, a heartbeat, suddenly stuff becomes irrelevant. So that's why, if we talk about the panic that's been happening with COVID, people die. People are dying every single day. But are you worried about what you've got, or are you worried about how grateful for what you have already? That's the trick. It's just being that. And it's a daily exercise of just, what am I grateful for today? And it's such simple, powerful things.
Do you ask yourself that every day? Do you have that moment of mindfulness where you sit in gratitude and you spend some time reflecting on the things that you have? Is that something that you practice?
We do it as a family every night at the dinner table. So we sit at the dinner table, and at the end of our meal, what 3 things are you grateful for today? We've done that for the last 3, maybe 4 years. And it's amazing watching, when we first started, my son said, I'm grateful for bacon. And I went, well, okay, I'll take that. And being grateful for anything. And, then he progressed to grateful for steak. And I said, okay, next we might go a bit deeper. But it's really wonderful when we have friends over for dinner, or our kids' friends over for sleepovers. And then watching my children explain it to their friends, and doing that as a daily practice. Some days you don't want to do it. If you're sick, I can tell you're not grateful for anything. You just do not care. So when you got the flu, you're exempt. You can just sit and, you don't have to. But when you got the flu, it's really hard to be grateful.
Especially the man flu.
Well, anyone who's sick, you just can't be grateful. You just want to curl up and get over it. Yes.
That's it.
But so that's a daily exercise we do as a family. We do it with our friends as well when we go to dinner or we go out for dinner. I've done it with so many people in so many places. I remember back being on a cruise ship when it was okay to go on a cruise ship. And I asked the waiters, what were they grateful for? And these 2 waiters said the same thing. I'm grateful for our families. We're here on this cruise ship for 6 months sacrificing so we can make our families have a better life. They were just grateful for their family. It's not what you have, it's who you have. That's the key part.
That's right. So how did that progress into you being a practitioner of purpose. So what made you decide on that name and that pathway?
Well, so then the other side of the business, so there's two core parts of the business. One is how to teach gratitude, empathy, and mindfulness. The other side of it is how to teach heart attack survivors to make the most of what they've got. But then it's very specific where it is talking to people who can have massive influence. So it'll be CEOs, business leaders, business owners, people that may have strayed from the path and didn't see the heart attack coming. Now, those people, if they travel through what's called post-traumatic growth, if they get post-traumatic growth, they can have a massive influence on the people around them. That's what I'm looking for, because sometimes it's really hard within a company to bring that change up from within a business. But if the guy at the top has a life-threatening moment, suddenly he's going to want to change everyone around him. And so that's part of that. I have this philosophy of planting trees under whose shade you can never sit. So if I get one guy who's had a heart attack, who's the CEO of a company, who suddenly switches to a mode of gratitude, empathy, and mindfulness, that's going to go through that business and everyone they impact. That'll touch thousands of people. That's my mission. So I'll work with families, but I'll also work with those business owners and business leaders. And then literally my mission is an anti-ad. It's not about selling anything. Really, I don't want them as my client, because that means they've had a heart attack. I don't actually want that and wish that on anyone. But what I can tell you is how the emotional roller coaster, because I've been there, I've lived through it, I've had that moment. And they talk about what your doctor, what your healthcare outcomes, what your fitness level, what to eat, everything like this, but they don't talk about the emotional roller coaster, particularly to business leaders. The term wounded lion. If you're the top of the tree and you're the boss and the leader and the CEO, and suddenly you have this life-threatening moment, you're wounded. Your pride is wounded. Especially totally different if they're overweight. They know they're eating terribly. They know the heart attack is coming. They're just in denial. It's not them. It's the ones who don't see it coming. It's the fit people. It's the active. I mean, my schedule while training, I would be getting up 3 times a week at 3:30 in the morning to train while holding down a full-time job.
So you never thought that you were going to have something like that then?
No. Not at all. Not at all. That's where the business is, and that's why the practitioner of purpose. It's the reframe. It's like when people, there's a lot of time and money and effort now spent about purpose. Oh, you've got to find your purpose. You lock into your purpose. Well, no, your purpose might be just providing a lifestyle for your family, right? So it doesn't matter what you're doing. Some of the happiest people I know can dig ditches, are happy with that, because they understand family and friends are the most important things, not stuff. So when you tap into the stuff is not important, but too many people think the stuff is what they need. So when you tap into that purpose, you can be doing any job. And the gift is going to work happy and coming home happy. If I can just help one person do that, because my dad went to work hungover, as a bricklayer, miserable, and came home, got drunk, miserable. That was his life. There was very little joy. And they're the kind of things that I want to change and I want to fix. You can be happy doing whatever job, but we don't teach people to combine gratitude, your purpose, and then happiness. It's just not taught. They don't teach it. We're starting to now, but there's a generation that's lost it.
Definitely. And I think it's a bit of a shame that so many people have to go through such serious events to be able to reevaluate their lives. And you hear it all the time, and I understand completely why people do it, because when these things occur to you, you really do have to take stock and really look at your life and look at where you want to go and appreciate the things that you do have. But how do you think people can do it when they haven't hit that serious bump in the road yet?
Oh, well, that's easy, because you can do any form of life scoring or mapping to have an understanding of your life quadrants, whatever terms you want to use, and then go, well, what is really important? That's where the taking time to reflect. So part of for the heart attack coaching clients I work with, it's the HEART model, which is health, educate, action, reflect, and then teach. You've got to pay it forward. You've always got to pay it forward. So that's the thing about that reflection. So anyone can look at where we are, and with some guidance, preemptive guidance, you can then start to unlock that part of you that you've gone, well, why am I like that? Why am I worrying about the opinion of Mr. and Mrs. Jones down the street and what they drive and what house they own? So many people are caught up in that trap. So many people are stuck in that world. And it's really, why go into debt for that if you're not going to be happy? But too many people, we've been told that lie. If I get this, then I'll be happy. And it's just, science says it's not true, but advertisers says it is.
Yeah, well, hopefully generations to come will, there'll be a shift in the way that things are spoken about and advertised. And obviously now with everything being at the touch of people's fingers, they're getting so much more information, which I think will, definitely help with that. But just touching on science, so you're currently studying an advanced diploma of neuroscience. So could you tell me a little bit about that and why you chose to do that?
Yeah, so that was one of those light bulb tingle moments in life when you go, I'm out. Wow, this is what I'm supposed to study. So it's neuroscience in leadership. So the actual process is about not only the neuroanatomy of what's actually going on in your brain, it's how you link that to being a boss, how you link that to leading people, coaching people. Because when you understand how the neuroscience exists and what's going on, you realize that we're just really, really complex animals that are just wanting to feel okay. So then you can link that back to how do you, by understanding that, how do you then improve that situation? And knowing that as social animals, the need to connect is really vital. And that's the one thing COVID's taught us so much is Zoom calls, telephone calls, FaceTime is wonderful, but physical human touch is wired into our DNA. It's wired into a baby. So that need for connection is so vital to everyone. And that's why, the term that the huggers aren't okay. People who like to hug, you can't, in society at the moment, you can't do that. And it's really, it creates conflict for them and stress for them because they're so used to that social connection. And that's where the neuroscience side of it is just fascinating for me. And then you apply that principle of, well, what did I learn? Because the one thing I left out of my story is at 15, Dad had gone, we're pretty broke. Things are really, really terrible. At 15, I sat down and typed up my suicide letter to my mum.
Wow.
So I'm now responsible for 2 teenagers, and I'm the happiest I've ever been in my life. So somewhere along the way, without knowing the neuroscience, I've applied those things, and it came from gratitude, being grateful for what you had, being grateful for our children, being grateful for the love of my life. My wife is like I said, my love affair with my wife is the greatest achievement of my life because I was not given an example or a model of how to do it.
So you've obviously, really taken the lessons that you've learnt through life and applied them, into your future and, with your children. But with mental health so prevalent in society and obviously suicide rates are going up and up and up, how do you deal with that with your own children, knowing that you wrote that letter to your mum when you were 15? How do you broach that subject with your kids? And what would you do if they had issues? So
that's where communication is vital to any situation. Actually having conversations regularly. And that's where one of the great things with our family is dinner table conversation and being what you're grateful for at the dinner table. Though that preempting of the gratefulness process allows you to have these big conversations. So sometimes these conversations at our dinner table, rather than being, oh, this is something we've got to do, the kids bring up what they talked about at school, what's happening, what's going on in their life. And you have to be open and transparent, and you have to communicate with them. If you're a distant parent or an absent parent, you may need to make sure you put as much energy into communicating with your children as you do with your boss at work. There's a great thing. I write every day on LinkedIn. That's where I put up something every day. But there's a great analogy by the author James Patterson, and it's about the juggling balls. There's 5 balls you juggle. You've got work, family, friendships, health, and there's one other, love, relationships, whatever it happens to be. The work is the rubber ball. All the rest are made of glass. If you drop your work career, you can always bounce back. But if you drop your love, your relationship, your health, you can't bounce back. Or if they're dropped, they're damaged and they'll never be the same. Your work career does not define your life. That's just something you do. And that was something I would say to people, and I've said for a number of years, I'm a beacon of positivity. I just happen to be a fleet manager at a Toyota dealership. My ego was not invested in where the work I did or what I did.
I think that's such a good analogy that, you can bounce back from, work. And I think COVID has probably, been very challenging for people, but I think that's a great message to them that you will bounce back. So maybe take this time to really invest in your family, in your relationships, with all the things that really do matter. And you'll be okay as far as work. You'll be able to do something.
Yep.
So, you'll be able to definitely bounce back. So I just think that's a fantastic analogy, Jeff, and it's hugely insightful. And I really think you've got such a wonderful story, and I hope so many people can connect with you and chat further with you about it.
And that's my message and mission for the rest of my life. This will be my career. The money is a byproduct of getting the message out, and that's okay. I've got kids in school. I've still got a mortgage. It's okay. But it will look after itself because the message is what I'm here to spread. And I have to, that's it for the rest of my career. That's what I'm meant to do. When you have those moments of reflection, I see having a heart attack as a gift. It's given me this massive opportunity to go, no, this is what I'm here for. This is my life purpose. That's why I'm a practitioner of purpose, because I found out, just don't have a heart attack. Do it before you have a heart attack.
Look, I think your message is absolutely brilliant. So thanks so much for joining me today. And I really love how you took such a massive leap of faith and you're now following your dreams and fulfilling that purpose. But before I do let you go, I have one more question for you. What would you do differently if only you knew?
If only I knew at 15 that I'd be a good dad and a good person.
That's brilliant. I love that. Yeah. And I hope your kids listen to this, so especially your son, so he can take something more away from that. So if you'd like to know more about Jeff, feel free to connect with him on LinkedIn, and you can also read more about him on our website, ifonlyyouKnewpodcast.com.au. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Christy.
Thanks, Grant.